Welcome to All Things Social Security. Enjoy your video. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. There was a request by somebody if I could do some sort of video explanation on filling out the function report, the SSA 3373, for someone who is a mental health disability claim. I would suggest that is probably someone under the age of 50 where they are claiming and likely do have severe, let's say we limit it to depression and anxiety. Very, very common. And they are asserting that it's so disabling, they can't go out and work any job full time successfully. And by the way, successfully means being able to do it on a sustained basis full time. Sustained is obviously full-time work days, and it lasts at least 6 months. Keep in mind then that if you can work 7 months and you get canned every time, or you're not showing up, whatever's going on, and then you have a month or two off, and then you do it another 7 months. Believe it or not, that's the ability to do sustain, and you're not going to be able to really argue that you can't do sustained work. Yes, you might not last for years, but that's not the definition of sustained, because a lot of people make a lot of money in 7 months, have 2 months off, do it again, have 2 months off, maybe to regroup, maybe to get their health back on track. But it's indicative of being able to make substantial income depending on what kind of job you have, even though you kind of fall off it after 7 months. So that is just a little add-on. But I wanted to maybe try to do it. This is probably going to be more than one video because I like to keep them short. I mean, usually under 10 minutes, that might not happen, but I will try. So what I'll probably do is if this goes long, I'll just break it up. So you don't have to sit through the whole thing if you don't want to. And usually when I have these series of videos where it's one topic, but it's all continuing but lengthy, and I don't do a lot of them, it'll be titled the same for each one, and then it will just say part one, part two, part three, part four. So I'm going to break them out and title them as such. So you won't have a problem finding it if you're interested in this. So function report for, let's presume it's a person under 50 or over 50, but only mental health problems. As you know, if they're 50 and older with only mental health impairments, no physical exertionally limiting impairments, the grids wouldn't apply to them. So they would have to be trying to win their case fully on mental. And they generally will have to prove that they can't do a simple third grade, unskilled, low stress, no public facing, no coworker facing perhaps, and very limited supervisor interaction. When I say very limited, they usually describe it as occasional, which is up to a third of a day. I think that's kind of hefty. If I had my supervisor in my face a third of the day, my supervisor, she's kind of a weotch. But that's a lot. That's like 2, 3 hours a day. You'd have to be interacting with your supervisor. Yikes. Who wants to do that in the best of circumstances? Okay. So, and the reason why I think they were asking the person was because the function report definitely seems more geared about physical impairments. I hear this a lot too, like, why am I filling this out? It's all about physical stuff and mine's mental. And in my case, a lot of times they're over 50 and I'm like, oh no, you don't understand. We are going after your physical. When someone thinks that their case, because their mental is what really drives them away from work subjectively, and they don't want to bother with the physical, we have to set them straight. And my nag hag nature comes out because they will not win on that 99% of the time, short of having physical. And because when you're over 50, you do tend to have some arthritises and other things that will limit you from doing, say, heavy or medium work on a full-time basis. It's just something that we have to do. Obviously, on the first page of the function report, and you can always download this off the internet, it's SSA-3373. The first page, the top of the first page, numbers 1 through 4, are just all about concrete answers about your name, your number, where do you live, who do you live with, that kind of thing. Then when you get to number 5, how do your illnesses, injuries, or conditions limit your ability to work? That is on the first page. And this will be very important. I do have videos on number 5, generally speaking. The things I would hone in on, if they apply, I mean, if you have a mental health condition that you say drives you away from work, you're going to have some concrete reasons why, right? You can't just say, because I'm depressed, so I can't work. That's not true, because most people with depression do work. So here's where you have to describe how it's different for you. I would suggest considering, and I say this only because it is often true of people with really severe depression and we're going to assume you're not in an institution. It's not that severe. Really severe depression or anxiety. Let's start with the depression. Sometimes depression, and I would say this is almost universally true. If it's severe, there are days you don't get out of bed. You get this lethargic malaise in bed. And it's like it's the old a body in motion stays in motion, a body at rest stays at rest. And when we are depressed and we stay in bed, we get more slowed down. We get super sleepy. We might sleep 15 hours a day. We might get up to go to the potty, go back to bed. So if that is the case, and it doesn't have to be every day, these things wax and wane, right? But if it only happens once a year, you find yourself bedridden for a week, you're probably not disabled. If you experienced it multiple times a week or perhaps a month, where for multiple days, let's say it's by the week, if you have 2, 3 days that you are loath to get out of bed, then that's pretty severe and you are just like out of it. If it's not every week, but you know it's going to happen at least every month, how many days will that bout last? Okay. So I would be talking about the days when it hits me, how often they are, and how long it lasts. Severe. If you just don't feel like doing anything, that's not alone probably going to do it, because we all don't feel like doing a lot of things we have to do. So something else is preventing you from being able to pull yourself up by the mental bootstraps and do it. Okay. So that's something I would put in number 5, that you are impeded from attending to any of your home obligations, including cleaning, feeding the family if you normally do that. Now, keep in mind, if you're taking care of kids and you're rising to the occasion, it's probably not going to look consistent. So you have to kind of be careful there. But those days, if you are bedridden, are probably days that you would not be able to attend to work because it's so bad you can't even attend to your activities of daily living on those days. You understand? So that would be information that limits your ability to do work. The days of absenteeism from my ADLs, which would apply to a job when I can't motivate, I got no energy, I just have to go back to sleep, and it lasts for X days. I would put that in there. Another thing I would focus on is attention and distractibility. A lot of times, and this would apply to depression and anxiety, both. We tend to be thinking about other things instead of like the mundane, boring stuff we're supposed to do for our daily chores, or or what would be in the work setting. So it might be where you are not able to keep concentration for any length of time, certainly not 2 hours. How if you're doing something simple, you literally trying to think of an example. Maybe you find yourself daydreaming, you stopped stuffing the envelopes, or you stopped doing those few dishes, or you're in front of the TV, but you literally your mind starts thinking about other things and you don't even know what you just watched. If you read something, you don't know what you just read. If you can't get through a brief set of directions without getting distracted with other things that you're thinking about. Because oftentimes when we're depressed, seriously depressed, or with anxiety, our mind is constantly thinking of other things. And it seems, at least in my caseloads for the last 20 or so years, very often anxiety brings about depression, and or depression brings about anxiety. I'm not sure how it works. I'm not a mental health professional. I just am constantly swimming in the pool of it because it's so prevalent. And I have, of course, access to all the records. So just the way our minds are thinking about other things. It could be the thing that stops us from going to sleep at night. Racing thoughts, ruminating, and that could limit the ability, if you describe it right, to do even unskilled work without being prompted by a supervisor. And remember, everything we're talking about now, if you're putting it here, you better have been telling your therapist about it for however long you've had the person. Hopefully it's a couple years at least. If not, hop to it now. And any kind of primary care provider and or any psychiatrist who's prescribing. These things should be in there. Those symptoms that interfere with your quality of life. Because what interferes with your quality of life can also interfere with your ability to function as a responsible adult, either in the workplace or getting your adult responsibilities done at home. It can also affect, so just again, what affects you if they do? These are just some ideas. Let's say your depression and or anxiety makes you really, really insecure. You feel like everyone's talking about you, possibly making fun behind your back or rolling their eyes, and they don't like you because you're maybe seem boring or whatever. If you are often thinking, what is that person thinking about me? That's very distracting too. But it also, and consider whether it is so. Does it prevent you from asking for assistance? Like, let's say you're in a store or out and about in your community since you're not working right now. Or when you're working, up until recently or whatever, did it really prevent you from, like, when you needed help on the job, from asking for it because you were just afraid of the consequences, whether it was from a supervisor? Maybe you think you'd be asking too many questions because you can't retain what you're supposed to do because you're so distracted. If you had a hesitancy of magnitude, afraid to ask for assistance or clarifications or to approach a coworker or a supervisor, that could be really important. Likewise, again, and sometimes depression and anxiety have other mental impairments by a different label, and everything overlaps. So someone with high anxiety, and let's say it's even PTSD, sometimes I got plenty of clients like this. They have difficulty curbing or maybe filtering their choice of words and reactions when they see something awry at work, or because they're not working, maybe now would be talking about awry when they're trying to get things done in the community, like do their banking or get to the grocery store or waiting in the waiting room for the doctor's office. And they might have a greater tendency to get in altercations, whether it's just rolling their eyes at people and then people being uncomfortable, or it's something more significant, like kind of an outburst. It can be a lack of control of impulsivity, making someone impulsive, and they thought about it more, but they don't have the capacity to decide to think about it more before they act. And that is how that mental health impairment provides symptoms that can be really limiting. Because if you're supposed to interact with a supervisor up to a third of a day, and if you're in one of these, maybe you have waxing and wanings of these symptoms, but if it happens with frequency like that or regularly, and you might be a little unreliable in terms of your reactions when your supervisor approaches you about something, that could be significant. I would include something like that if that's true. If you are, this would be the depression and anxiety again. If you are prone to, and I have clients like this that will break out into heart-wrenching tears when they think about their issues, perhaps when someone is constructively criticizing them on the job and they are crying a lot. Crying on the job is very distracting to others. Not only does it stop you from doing your work for that time, so you're off task, mostly, not always, but probably mostly, it is distracting to everybody else. Nobody else knows how to deal with it. Someone might have to break away from their job task to come and see if you're okay. If you're loud, obviously that would be a little invasive of their ability to focus. So those activities of yours that are really distracting to others. And it could also be if you're working with the public, but I'm not honing on that because there are by and large jobs that they attribute for someone who says, I can't work. Well, you could do this, even given all your impairments and the symptoms. They say there are jobs without working with the public and without dealing with coworkers. There's never a job where you don't have to at least occasionally deal with a supervisor. So let's assume for the moment, and you have to assume it too, that you are showing that you cannot deal with the public, you cannot deal with coworkers reliably, have appropriate interactions with them. Those are all the things, the poor attendance, the inability to stay on task at work without someone nudging you back again. So excess supervision would be required. Excess supervision is considered not tolerable generally to employers. There are some jobs that allow for there's more supervision than others, but we're talking about excess. Okay, so that is stuff that I would put in 5. In 6, let's move down to number 6. This is the top of the second page. If you look at it, it says page 4 of 10, but that's only because they have instructional disclaimer pages in the front of the standard SSA 3373. And this, of course, is the February 2024 version. So question number 6 is describe what you do from the time you wake up until the time you go to bed. If you sleep much of the day away, and that happens, like you said, good days and bad days and less bad days, and you kind of want to broach it as some days are clearly not as bad as others. But this is like 3 days a week, this is what happens to me. Maybe you wake up at 1 in the afternoon, even though you were in bed by 10 or 11. You wake up groggy. Medication side effects, and I should bring that up for number 5. If your medications require that you go take a nap, or make you nauseous or whatever the side effects are, I would throw them in there because the side effects will affect some semblance of jobs, maybe not all the ones you need to, but they help nick away at some of the others. So I would include those. If they make you very groggy, if they make you irritable, I would include that. I would also include the taking of the medicines in the number 6, although they know you take them if you listed them elsewhere. Excess sleep, if you have to nap, regardless. Let's say get up late and then by 3 o'clock, you got to take another snoozy, whatever the case may be. Depression and anxiety it does seem to make us want to escape the world. And I say want, but we don't really want it. We're just it's like we have no choice, right? And I don't want to say that too heavily because there often is a choice, but it is a big, huge uphill climb to make it as opposed to someone else who could just hop to it. And that's the struggle, right? Um, the sleeping, which seems to be very prevalent amongst depressed people and probably a bit of the anxious people too, I would be putting that in number 6. If the tearfulness, my day is interrupted by bouts of tearfulness or panic attacks, you kind of want to talk about how often they are because they're probably not going to believe it's all day long. So try to hone it. If this happens to you, as to when it does on certain days of this, you go to your medical appointments. Obviously, you have therapy. You should be having therapy or else you're not going to win your case. 6 might look really boring. It might take you 3 paraphrases or short phrases to say, I get up. It might be that I sit in front of the TV because I just can't even motivate or have energy to do anything and I fall asleep in the recliner or whatever. You're not in the recliner like some people are for physical pain reasons or leg edema or anything like that. It's just that you're trying not to be in your bed all the time and you want to be in the living room where at least you can feel like you're half alive and you might have the TV on to help pass the time so you're not totally alone with your head. So you can explain that. If you fall asleep in front of the TV in short order, I would say that too. I try to watch TV or I try to watch videos on self-help or I don't know, whatever you do. And I invariably, despite being in bed for 14 hours the night before, I am falling asleep in the chair. Those are the kind of things I would include. Maybe what time you go to bed, maybe what time you wake up, maybe if it takes you a while you wake up but you lie in bed because you're so brain fogged out. Yeah, that's where I would be leaning. And then as you go through questions in the rest of the function report, this happens a lot of the time when I work with clients on their function report. Something will come up later in one of the later questions, and I'll be like, oh, that will be perfect to add to 5 and 6 since you said it here. Let's see how you work, how you work that into your day, like your day's schedule as we're doing here in number 6. Or you definitely want to add it to number 5 because what they said later is like, oh my gosh, it completely would interfere with certain jobs. We want it in by and large. Okay, number 7, do you take care of anyone else, such as husband, wife, children, grandchildren, parents, friend, or other? If you are a caretaker, and I don't mean someone who just occasionally goes to your mom's house and cleans her toilet. That's not caretaking. That's helping a loved one. But if people live with you and you're responsible for their basic needs, feeding them or dressing them, and you're able to do it, that's going to be real troublesome. Doesn't mean you don't have depression. However, you're able to rise to do the chores that are inherent in caretaking. Take it from me, I know it's very exhausting, particularly when you're trying to keep a good attitude, right? So, hi Tasha. Hold on, guys. Maybe she wants to say, oops, that's going the wrong way. Maybe I do it here. I don't know what I'm doing, just in case. You're not gonna be able to see her. Sorry. I guess because of that background or whatever. All right. Next time, we'll have the regular room back here. So think long and hard. A lot of people, and I've said this in other videos when it didn't have to do with mental health, sometimes they want to talk about their family because they think it's important that they represent what a loving parent they are, even if they can't do all the things they would have liked to do, like play football with a 10-year-old or whatever. So they want to say that yes, they caretake. And if you are going to say yes, and you sometimes give advice to a younger, say a child or grandchild, I don't know if that's caretaking. Because the question is, do you take care of? The question is not, do you occasionally give advice to? But sometimes I think people put it there because they want the reader to know what a good person they are, a loving family member. And they're not letting their family suffer because of their own issues. Think long and hard about how much you do that and whether you're exaggerating. Because if you are significantly impaired, stuff honestly falls much to the wayside. So try not to exaggerate it out because you feel guilty, and you probably do. If you're filing for SSD for mental health, you probably do feel terrible about it. And I feel for you. I do understand that. But here's not the way to make yourself feel better. Be honest. You know, if you're not actually doing the caretaking, you just all kind of live under one roof and someone else kind of oversees everything, the other spouse or whoever. That's Tasha, like I said. I would just lay low with that. Same thing with taking care of pets or other animals, but to a lesser degree, because a lot of people with severe depression or anxiety find a lot of, that's what they call them, therapy animals, right? A lot of solace. And let's face it, throwing down some food every day for the dog or letting him out the back door is not the same amount of energy that would be indicative of caring for children full time or anything like that. Now, if you do go for 2 mile walks with the dog twice a day, you're going to look like you're pretty much able to rise and shine. Um, Now, if it's an anxiety thing, not necessarily. So it really all depends. If you have a pet and you do, you have to say yes that you do because you feed it. And then you describe what you do. I feed him once a day, let him out in the backyard, or I walk him when able. Because again, if you're bedridden for an entire day, that's probably not the day you take him for the walk, right? You probably let him out the back door. Just saying. Number 9, does anyone help you care for other people or animals? If you live alone, you're going to have a hard time probably honestly saying yes to this. You're probably going to have to say no. But if you do live with family, it is very common for other family members to be stepping in and doing the more vigorous things. It might be that you feed them on occasion, not maybe as reliably as you would like to suggest you do, and that it's them actually making sure it was done. Did you feed the dog? All right. He didn't feed it. I'll feed it. That kind of thing. So just remember to explain in number 9 what everyone else does to help take care of those pets. 10, what were you able to do before your illnesses, injuries, or conditions that you can't do now? This is obviously going to depend on what your life was like before. If it has to do with having energy, working full time, being happy, being able to enjoy people, that kind of thing, not being paranoid. Let's say you feel like you got a little paranoia. You could focus on the mental part because like we were saying before, this is not really in the person we're talking about. We're not talking about the physical aspects. Now, if you did have some physical things, but the big thing you feel about is mental, you definitely want to hone in on the mental. Don't leave out the physical, and you're going to have to try to get them both in here and fit it in the space. There are ways to do that. We've completely mastered that. Sleep, obviously, anxiety and depression often greatly impact sleep. Physical stuff does too. I mean, pain. I mean, sleep is such a priceless commodity that we just often don't have enough of because of these impairments, right? But if you have anxiety, why would that suddenly not affect you at night? I mean, I realize you probably take a sleeping medication. I will tell you this, if the sleeping medication suffices and you sleep great, well then that's not gonna be where sleep or poor sleep is going to help your case because you just said I can sleep like a charm. Of course, you might feel groggy in the morning and you probably want to represent that up in number 6 and possibly number 5, because if you're super groggy in the morning, it's going to be really hard to get to work. Some might say, well, get up an hour earlier so you're groggier early and you can still get to work on time. I'd be the person that would say that, actually. But nonetheless, it does mean that you have to use more of your spare time to get ready for work because you got to get over the grog and then get yourself out the door. Personal care. Now, you don't have physical problems, you have mental. So why should any of this be a problem? Well, it is oftentimes because people don't care to do these things. So if we don't have a will, then we are impeded from doing these things that are kind of centered on being a sustaining able person. So dressing, for instance, a lot of times, and so just you have to judge whether this is true for you. Sometimes people don't change their clothes for a week. They just don't care. That's what the depression can do. Anxiety, maybe less so. Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time. Bathing, definitely the same idea. Don't care to bathe as much as I used to. You could say, I'll shower once a week or twice a week or whatever, once every 2 weeks, whatever the case may be. Caring for hair, I don't care for it. If I'm a female, I might throw it in a ponytail. If I'm a man, I just kind of let it roll. Depends what you do. Again, that would probably be more the depression thing. So someone who has strictly anxiety, they might still do all these things. You understand? Shaving, same idea. That's about looking dapper. Feeding oneself, that's about actual ability to, use a fork, use a spoon. But you could add something in here. If there's something different, like not motivated to take the time to heat up the leftovers or the canned soup, I often just eat chips That's how unmotivated I am. And my appetite, it could be one's appetite is diminished, or some people eat the day away. So using the toilet, if you have, I know sometimes anxiety brings about its own difficulties. It could be IBS type of things. It could be diarrhea, it could be constipation. Those really do make using the toilet more challenging. It might be more frequent, more time in the toilet. It could cause stomach pains and other pains in the associated areas. So you could throw them in there. Might not change exactly the fact that you could sit on the toilet and get up from the toilet, which, by the way, is something that is very different a lot of time when there's physical impairments, like my back people. They all are like, oh, I get up and down really carefully. Or they even have a bar there now, or they've got a higher toilet now, so they don't have to risk the drop down by sitting and the difficulty getting back up without assistance from the sitting position. And other, that would be anything else you can think of. The special reminders is on the next page now. It's going to say page 5 out of 10, but I think it's page, what did I say, 3? Do you need any special reminders to take care of personal needs and grooming? A lot of times with depression and maybe even anxiety, because you're so focused on other things, but specifically the bad depression, people aren't interested in their personal needs and grooming. A lot of times the family members will be like, Dad, you got to shower, you stink. Dad, when's the last time you showered? It's been a week, you really stink, you know? And that would also be true of brushing the hair, changing the clothes. Maybe there's stains all over the shirt, you know? It's incredible what can happen. So same thing with reminders to take medicine when we are depressed or overly anxious. Our concentration, like we were talking about before, concentration, focus, recall, retention. Did I take that early this morning? Let's just take it twice a day. Did I take my first dose? And if you need help, is it because someone else is helping you, or do you have to write it down? Do you forget to write it down? Do you have a little thing right there on the counter with the meds? That kind of thing. Meals. Do you prepare your own meals? Yes or no? I would include in this grabbing a banana out of off the counter or an apple out of the fridge. Although you're not preparing, I would mention it because that might be all you're eating or a bag of chips. So don't pretend like you're so depressed you don't even feed yourself. You do, it might just be crap, right? But I would make it clear how simplified it is. Like I literally, like, if there's a yogurt, I'll grab it. If your appetite is different, this is probably the area of where to say how often do you prepare meals. If you have a really bad, poor appetite now, you probably do it a lot less. And you could say, I don't prepare them, but I grab a pre-made thing. A frozen dinner they have as one of the examples. You're not actually preparing it, but you're throwing it in the microwave, right? And so I would include that because it's kind of like, what efforts are you able to do to get yourself fed? So you want to show that you don't have the motivation. You're not physically disabled, but you do not have the motivation to really spend 30 minutes preparing something, putting it together, because food just doesn't interest you in that much. Because if food interested you that much, that almost sounds like less severe depression. You can still be depressed, but maybe not the kind that's going to be pervasive in terms of preventing you from doing the boring tasks because you're willing to do it with the food. Yeah, it asks you how often you prepare foods. Again, if you have an impaired appetite, you might have seen that the amount of times you actually go and put something together for yourself is less. So that's going to be on a case by case basis, whatever happens to you. How long does it take you? If you're doing 2 or 3 hour meal preps, you probably do not have the severest of depression. Just my guess, just from what I've seen, and I'm not a mental health professional, but I'm just saying this from everything I've seen for the last 20 whatever years. And then any changes in cooking habits since the illness and/or condition began. That's where you can talk about, hey, I used to make multi-course meals for my family. We used to have sit-down dinners every night with all the basics. And now we don't do that at all. I don't do it. My spouse does it, or my eldest child, who's now 18, does it. Or now kind of like we just order out a lot, get pizza, pre-made stuff. So that's your opportunity to show that this has affected you that bad. Because as we know, and I have to say, I wasn't really a big cooker when my kids are grown. My husband was, though, so I supported him in that. But like I had the mom that stayed home and cooked dinners every night. So when my dad came home from his heavy work, the family all ate together. So I know that's like a dying breed, right? Hopefully it'll come back. 14 is the house and yard work. I will say, by and large, with severe depression, particularly the depression, it's again that motivating thing. The energy to do it is often very lacking. And these things tend to be done far less often where the house is kind of dirty. Think about your house now and think about what it used to be when you were of healthy mind. What is the difference? You might have a spouse that does all the cleaning, and so you don't really see a difference because someone else is doing it for you, but you kind of have to exemplify it. It might be where you do all of these things, but you do them so infrequently that you want to make it clear that it's infrequent. I I have done, because it says the ones that you're able to do. If you are so depressed that you don't do the things that should be done 2 or 3 times a week, then you're not able to do them two or 3 times a week because of your depression. And I would kind of make that clear about the motivation and the energy and the just don't care. It's so trivial to me because of how bad I feel from a mental standpoint. B in 14 is how much time does it take you and how often do you do each of these things? So again, if you're doing them every day and you're able to do them every day and do them for a normal amount of time, that's going to be evidence of not being as severely disabled as someone who can't do that. Because remember, household chores are a job. And if you can do them at home on a reliable, steady basis, does it mean you can work 8 hours a day? No, but it certainly doesn't mean you can't, right? Do you need help or encouragement doing these things? I will say it from what I've seen, that is often the case, particularly with the depressive group, not necessarily with the anxiety group. Family members would be like, come on, can you just get up and just help me a little bit with the house? It does cause strife, right? When someone else isn't, when one of us is not pulling the weight, doing some of the chores that we physically can do. And I think it goes a little unrecognized at first by family members that just think the person's lazy or whatever, and it's not, particularly if you know them from before and they were never like that. It can be the depression. And it's so pervasive when it gets bad. 15, this is about going outside. I usually do take this to mean like literally stepping out your door. Maybe you go to the mailbox or whatever. It doesn't mean going outside and driving all the way to town. It could be something far less. So most people do still go outside at times, even if nothing else, to go to their therapy appointment or any other appointments they have, but not always. So you have to give your accurate statement here. Because when going out, how do you travel? Walk, drive a car, ride in a car, ride a bicycle. I never see that anymore. Use public transportation and other. This is going to depend on the real peculiarities of your life and symptoms now. If your concentration and focus and memory are really, really impaired, potentially due to the severe depression or anxiety, some people don't even drive a car anymore. Number 15D here is, do you drive? And I would suggest with D, but do you drive? Because you could have that you do walk, you do drive, you do ride in a car. If you're in the country, you probably don't use public transportation, but if you're in the city, maybe you do. Now, some of these things are going to be greatly impacted by anxiety. If you have severe anxiety, is that the time you decide to drive your car? Maybe not. Maybe you don't want to leave the house during those times. So maybe you're doing none of those. So you kind of perhaps want to expound on that. So for 15D, do you drive? Let's say you still do sometimes, but it's on those good days, not on those bad days. I would explain. I maybe even say yes and no. On my less bad days, I will drive to my therapy appointment that's 5 minutes away when I don't have a ride, or maybe you don't need a ride on your less bad days. But on the days when I am really stuck in this horrible cloud and I'm in bed, I don't even leave the house, much less hop behind a wheel. And I mean, honestly, would it even be safe, right? When we're feeling that way. For anxiety people, driving can affect that. I know some people who feel that they don't have enough focus and concentration, and they're not depressed, they're overly severely anxious, and they don't feel safe. They feel like they're trigger happy on the gas or the brake, don't feel that they can focus enough to be paying attention sufficiently, and they're afraid they're going to cause an accident. If you say you can drive no problem, again, probably not going to win your case. So you need to think long and hard about where it is limited. Consider your bad and good days, and think about all the things we're talking about here in terms of focus, concentration. I mean, if you're in such a malaise that you were stuck in bed due to a severely depressive state for a few days, think about how risky that driving would be. I mean, you obviously have no inclination to do it anyway, but I'm just saying, if you were to do it, I wouldn't want to be walking on the sidewalk, let's put it that way, with you in town driving. There's another question: when going out alone, when going out, can you go out alone? Some people with severe anxiety, such that they have panic attacks, do not go out alone. So think about whether you have those, and if there are times, and I mean, you might just be like, I'm not going out at all. Or then like, I got to go to that doctor's office. I really want my wife to come with me or my husband to come with me because I just feel so anxious and I'm afraid I'm going to have a panic attack. Or maybe they're more prone to those crying spells that they cannot control that come upon them. And they may have them less when they have a loved one with them. Does that affect whether you go out alone or not, or if you wait until someone can go with you? All the things to think about. Shopping. This one's always fun. If you do shopping, do you shop in store, by phone, by mail, by computer? And notice that they ask and see, this is 16. How often do you shop and how long does it take you? Again, shopping is a chore. If you enjoy it, if you enjoy it, you're not maybe as depressed, at least at the times you're going. So maybe it's more of a manic thing. I don't know. What you shop for. Are you going gift shopping? The things that you do that are less for your needs and more for fun and enjoyment optically might not serve you well. And again, the people I know that are severely depressed or with severe anxiety, there are total effects on how they shop. A lot of times it's a family member that does it all. A lot of times they will go together just to get out of the house. And then sometimes they have to go sit in the car because they're getting anxious about the stores getting busy and all that. Some people do it all by computer. And by the way, when they say by phone, that might mean by not by talking, but by smart device. Because I know some people don't even have computers and they use their phone like a computer. So it's kind of hard to know which way they mean. They might mean it that way. The more you go out in stores, the more able you are. So keep that in mind. So don't give a sloppy answer that's not true. Think about it. Keep a journal, perhaps, of all the last times you went to the store. The money question, and this is definitely a mental one, by and large. Are you able to pay bills, count change, handle a savings account, use a checkbook or money order? Yes or no? And then just explain all no answers. Be mindful that they are not asking you if you have money. Some people give the response, I can't do any of these because I have no money. No, they're not asking about your wealth. I know you're trying to slick it in there so they can feel sorry for you, but that's not how you're going to win this case and potentially cause irritation. It is about, for instance, paying bills. And this is kind of morphed in the last few years because we have automatic bill pay. And that helps people because this question can sometimes cause someone who wins their SSD for the SSA to say, you need a representative payee. We can't give the money straight to you. So if you would maybe not be able to pay bills on time because you just get distracted and you forget to check the calendar and when they're due and all that, you're just not as organized as you were because of your focus and concentration issues that stem from your severe depression or anxiety. If you do pay with auto bill pay through your bank or however you set it up, I would say, I don't know that I would say something to the effect of, I use automatic bill pay because hand paying the bills with checks just doesn't seem to be anything we do anymore. And I don't know that I would be able to keep up with them if I did it by hand. You could say that if you're doing auto bill pay, let them know that you're totally fine with the auto bill pay. It works, right? If counting change is like a focus and concentration thing, of course, someone who, and we're not talking about physical impairments here, but people that have severe numbness and tingling in their fingers or poor dexterity problems now due to, could be carpal tunnel, it could be some sort of cervical radiculopathy type of thing. They often have difficulty. It's not counting the change, it's handling the change. Sometimes I'll put that in there if it's a physical case, but here we're talking about just the mental, right? Counting change is the ability to focus and count those numbers. If you have difficulty counting the change, that would be indicative of quite a bit of maybe interference with your concentration, even in the short, like within 15, 20 seconds, you get off track counting the change. Handling a savings account, do we even handle them anymore? I don't know. So I'll let you guys have that one. Using a checkbook or money orders, people oftentimes don't write a lot of checks anymore because of that auto bill pay. So that is something you're just gonna have to answer yourself. And don't say you can do it if you think that you could do it, but you haven't done it in 3 years. Don't do that. Don't give yourself the benefit of that doubt because that would hurt your case and it might not be accurate. Has your ability to handle money changed since the illness? If your concentration has been very impeded since you started with this severe depression or anxiety, it probably is. But again, you could always, if accurate, discuss the auto bill pay that you use. And that has completely taken care of any problem you have with the concentration or remembering to pay the bills on a certain day every month because you have auto bill pay set up. 18. Now, this, by the way, is the top of page 7 of 10. So if you don't have the first two disclaimer directional pages that the SSA includes in the front of this form, this would probably be page 5. So 18, hobbies and interests. What are your hobbies and interests? Again, if you're engaging in a lot of hobby activity, it will, and you're probably not, But if don't make the mistake of talking about your old hobbies that you no longer do, that you're no longer interested in enough to do because of the depression, because they're not your hobbies anymore. They were your hobbies. So if you don't have hobbies and interests anymore because you don't give a flying rat's, you know what, then don't put them down here. Maybe you say, I don't have any hobbies and interests anymore. I mean, you could say, I do watch TV, but it's not really a hobby. I usually fall asleep when I'm watching it. The more of those fun little hobbies that we do, I think it detracts from any severity we might claim with depression. And the more complicated they are, let's say you're playing chess, it might be suggested that your anxiety is not so distracting as you might be otherwise claiming. And again, I'm pretty sure by and large, if it's as severe as you believe your impairment to be, so much that you can't even go get a simple, easy job, the unskilled one we were talking about before, you probably have dropped to the wayside so many of your old hobbies. And that's really sad because that's your quality of life, right? But this is where you want to make sure you're not talking about the past and you're just talking about what your hobbies and interests are now. What are you doing every day? Look at your last 2 weeks. Think about it. Or if you can't remember, journal it for the next 2 weeks and see, wow, I'm really not doing squat. Damn, I'm boring. You know what I mean? If you do still try to read, but you find you're not able to focus very much, you could say, I still like to read, but I find that I can't do it like I used to. I still try, but I fall asleep to the book. Same could be with TV. I fall asleep in front of the TV, or I don't remember what I watched. That would be help illustrate the poor retention that you have, even with something that you typically enjoyed. They ask you how often you do these things. Again, if you're going to flea markets and you're going to amusement parks and you're going to car shows, you might not be as depressed as it would take to be disabled from depression because you're still able to do the fun things. So it really would look more like he just doesn't want to do the boring work that we all do to self-sustain because, work is work. This follow your dream or else don't work. That doesn't fly. We're adults. We have to go to work if we can, not only if we want. So you want to make sure that you're not giving the impression, if inaccurate, that you're simply not working because I don't want to do that. It's because it really impedes your ability to motivate enough to get up and out there. And then C says, this is again 18, describe any changes in these activities since the illnesses, injuries, or conditions began. And that's where you can go to town on some of those old hobbies you used to do that you no longer do, if you want to include them. And if you can't do it because you can't focus enough, put it down. It might be that you're not interested, but by and large, check out, think hard about it. It might just be that you're not interested anymore. It might be because you don't retain any of it anyway, or your fatigue just pulls you out of it. You're not enjoying it because you just want to go back to bed. Social activities. There's going to be a biggie too. How do you spend time with others? In person, on the phone, email, texting, mail, video chat, such as Skype or FaceTime or Zoom. That is going to be on an individual basis. Obviously, the more video chat and things like that you do and email is going to be more indicative, maybe not this very highly severe depression. Anxiety, people still talk to their their friends and family. So that can be, unless it's combined with severe depression. So mostly when we talk about this one is probably more about the depressed. However, if under B, it says describe the kind of things you do with others. If you have severe anxiety and you go out to restaurants and you go to the movie theater and you go to rock concerts with others, that kind of suggests maybe not. Maybe you're not that anxious. Maybe you're not that fear of crowds you were talking about, or the grave discomfort, fear of a panic attack. So think it through, and don't make this common mistake either. People talk about what they did before their depression, anxiety got to the extent it is now. So a lot of times when I'm working with a client, I'll see you talk about going to concert with. When's the last time you went to that rock concert? And they'll be like, it's been a while. Oh, I think I saw Brandon Lake in 21. Oh, okay. So that's not really what you do now. 21, that's 4 years ago. Be very cognizant of the fact that you're talking about now, today. And yes, not just this day you're not going to a concert, but let's say you haven't gone to one since last summer. And let's say you filed in October. You have not done any of that since you filed. Obviously, if you say you went to one last October, but you said you've been severely depressed for 3 years, you're obviously potentially getting worse, but maybe a year ago you weren't quite so bad that you couldn't work. So it's all going to be very dependent, and just be careful and think significantly about the dates of things, where they line up. and what it is about now, because this is all about now. Let's see. If you do talk on the phone with friends or loved ones, but it's always very short conversations, I would make sure, like, let's say I talk to my daughter every day on the phone, but it's all of like 10 seconds to say, I love you. How was your day? Right? Because you're not in the chit-chatty kind of mood. So that's just another thing you can consider adding if it is accurate. List the places you go to on a regular basis. And they say, for example, church, community center, sports events, social groups. Obviously, if you're engaging in the fun things like sports events and social groups, you're not going to look so disabled and or anxious. Church might be something that someone does go to, but if you can motivate to get there on Sundays with the depression regularly, it might be inconsistent with saying before that you can't do things regularly because you're so actively depressed. You could, however, if you go to church when able and say, I used to go to church every week. It was really important to me. And now sometimes I can't even get out of bed. It falls in the days that I've had these horrible days and I miss 3 out of 4 in the month or 2 out of 4. Or now I only go once every 2 months, whatever the case may be. Document it so you know. Don't just guess. And don't avoid saying it if it's true because you feel like, a bad worshiper. If you don't go, this is your chance to say that you haven't been able to go because of those debilitating depressive episodes. Then under the same question of 19 social activities and under C, it says, do you need to be reminded to go to places such as the ones you go to on a regular basis? You would answer that appropriately. It is a funny question they ask because they say, how often do you go? And how much do you take part? How much do you take part? I think the general answer is usually I participate as needed if it's like doctor's appointments, because that could be where you put, I go to my doctor's appointments regularly. I participate as needed, or I bring my wife with me because I know I'm going to forget and get tongue-tied or something in the appointment, and she can help make sure that he knows everything that we need for him to know. And again, there's another question here. You'll see it's kind of similar to one you answered before. Do you need someone to accompany you? Make sure your answer, you thought about it here and there, and the answers really obviously should be jiving. So make sure you cross-reference your answers where appropriate. Those are the things we look for when we're helping someone be accurate. D is, do you have any problems getting along with family, friends, neighbors, or others? Yes or no? Again, either depression or anxiety can definitely affect this. Sometimes people are very, very irritable with either condition, and people just don't like being around them, or they don't like being around other people. Other times, they're just, what do they call it? Sad Sam or whatever. Sometimes they are irritable and they lash out at people. Their irritation gets the better of them. They have a lower threshold of tolerance for the antics of others, and they will say something snooty, snippy, whatever, or get in a full-blown tirade. Those are really important things to share if that happens. I mean, when I have my pain people, sometimes it happens based on pain. Pain tends to bring depression and anxiety there too. But if any of that is going on, so even if you recluse, let's say you isolate yourself so that you don't have a problem getting along with people, that is because you have concerns that you do have problems getting along with people when these moods strike you. So I would be thinking long and hard about the yes answer and how to answer that. You could say, I'm not as pleasant as I used to be. Sometimes I'm a little rude because I'm just so depressed. So now I just don't go out and see these people because I really don't want to seem rude, but when I'm out, I just don't care what anybody thinks, and I don't play. Well, you can answer that. I would think of those things when I'm answering 19D. E is describe any changes in social activities since the illness, injuries, or conditions began. Super, super, super important, because if you were never a social person and you're not now, the effect on your life is not going to be so great. But usually even a person who was never social to begin with, but wasn't, with severe clinical depression, they could at least activate when they had to. They might do it demurely. They might not be the life of the party, but they could. So do your best to explain, even if you were that kind of person, the difference now. The difference now is you can't even choose to do the social event potentially because you cannot motivate or get the energy to even lift a leg out of the bed. And by the way, speaking of that, sometimes people with severe depression, and again, the overlapping anxiety, depression, their body parts sometimes feel really heavy. Like their leg feels like it's moving underwater sometimes. So it can be physical. It can add to potentially a perception, at least, of grave physical muscular fatigue. So everybody's different, but just something for you to think about in case it does, okay? And of course, all these things that they do, you need to talk to your therapist and your PCP at the very least, because you need to have it documented in the medical records. It will then support this as not being just, ooh, your own statement made out of the blue. Okay, we're getting close, guys. This is 20A. This is the one that seems, well, at least half of them are very physical. So these, if you have no physical problems, these might not affect you. However, the physical part, that would be lifting, squatting, bending, standing, reaching, walking, sitting, kneeling, stair climbing. Okay. If that is the case, but you do get that feeling like you're moving underwater, so fatigued physically with your severely exhausting depression, here's where you could even just have a one-liner about the physical things, if it's the case. Because I always feel like I'm moving underwater and all the physical activities of lifting, squatting, bed just seem like so much extra effort. I feel like I'm doing it underwater or whatever your reality is, that might be a place where you could put it. But aside from that, the other items like memory, completing tasks, concentration, understanding, following instructions, using hands, and getting along with others. Those things are, if they're not affected by severe depression, then you're probably not disabled from severe depression. Focus, concentration, getting things done, completing tasks. It could be that, a job that should take you an hour takes you 3 weeks because 5 minutes, you're like, I'm out of here, and then you come back to it. But that's affecting it. And that's not done in a timely manner. So even if you do get it done 3 weeks later, it's not really efficient, right? Far from it. Memory, people don't retain as much and then they can't remember it later. Sometimes they just can't do the recall. I don't know what all the little technical words are. I would expect pretty much all of these, not the using hands, that would be the physical part. And we just discussed about getting along with others and wanting to be around them, or does it rise to the level of actually fighting with people a lot? So those are the things you're going to want to address. And again, those you would expect many of them to be implicated with the mental health condition of severe depression or severe anxiety. And the distractibility and the poor concentration is what often affects the understanding and the following instructions. A lot of times people will leave those out. And it's funny, they'll leave them out and they won't check them off. And then I'm reviewing their activities answers and they completely didn't understand half the questions and wrote ridiculously inappropriate responses. Yet they didn't check off that they had difficulty following instructions, which they clearly did because they couldn't do the form, like even reasonably, So all that stuff we go through, but give it some thought. If you have to reread directions over and over, you have difficulty following directions. Take that as an assumption right there. And then you could say, I have to reread because I can't remember even like 3 sentence directions. I have to do it in pieces or whatever, however your reality is. And of course, to me, that also means understanding. Understanding could also be if you misinterpret people a lot, or you just feel like they're looking at you like, it could be understanding directions too, don't get me wrong, but it could also be understanding someone's meaning, misinterpreting it. If we're paranoid, we might have difficulty understanding other people's positions or understanding that they're not actually looking at us weird. We're just, I don't know, being paranoid. All right. Then they ask if you're right-handed or left-handed. Obviously, just answer that. The next questions are about walking and needing to rest. You still have to answer it even though you're mental health. If you say unlimited, I mean, technically, physically, you could say unlimited, but I have to ask you then. Think about, basically what you're saying is, yeah, but I'm so depressed, I would never get out there and do it. Understood. If you did get out there, do you get that fatigue, the malaise from the depression that makes suddenly the walking very exhausting and like you just want to crawl and lie down under that tree over there? Think about that. Now, you don't want to be pretending you have a physical walking impairment when you don't. So you would want to specify, I think, that I get so tired after a short amount of activity with this depression that I just feel like I have to crawl back into bed. That might be something you could weave into that if that's accurate. Hey, stop. It's not yours. How long can you pay attention? Huge, huge, huge. It is very, very hard usually for someone with severe mental health struggles of depression, anxiety to pay attention for long. It just is. It's almost by definition. So think about that. Maybe try watching maybe your favorite show. Do you actually stay very in tune the whole time? Yes or no? And then try watching something that's drier and would normally be a little boring. Is that shorter? And you could explain that if it's something that I would typically have been interested in, I could do it a little longer. You have to squeeze in these little lines here too. But you can always put it in remarks, I suppose. I think that one's important that's 20D, for the mental health claim. when your case is relying totally on mental health. And again, most of the people I know have a difficult time lasting, I don't know, probably more than 10 minutes. But everyone's different. So, do you finish what you start? For example, a conversation, chores, reading, watching a movie. We talked about that before. Usually, for the severe depressives, the answer is no. Don't feel like a louse if you say no. They might finish a conversation, but if your conversations are only 5 minutes, it's not that hard. What about the chores that take a half hour? So, if any of those are, they only give you yes or no. If any of those are no, I don't finish that, I would click no. They don't actually ask for details. How well do you follow written instructions? Again, we talked about this. If your focus and concentration is off and you can't retain what you read and you have to reread, you definitely want to specify that. Same with spoken. If you're not sure, maybe go on like YouTube or someplace and look for a instructional video and then try to listen to it once and then go do what it said. Will you remember all those steps? Dare ya. All right. I would expect F and G to be impaired. That's the written and the spoken instructions. And it says, how well do you do it? I mean, they don't ask you, they don't really tell you how do you describe it, but sometimes people will say really poorly. I have to ask for them to repeat things. If I'm doing a YouTube, trying to learn something from YouTube, not that I've done it in a while, but I would have to replay it and replay it and replay it because I cannot remember all the things I heard. All right. Have you ever been fired or laid off from a job because of getting along with other people? Again, guys, this is going to be cross-referenced to a couple other places in the function report. So make sure you look at all three and see if you were thinking about it properly for all three. Again, anxiety, sometimes PTSD, there can be, and depression, irritability, and a short fuse. So I have my handful of clients who have been terminated because they would give an irritated response to coworkers one too many times, or once or twice to a supervisor. Or if you're working with the public, you cannot do that with the public. So you want to be expressed. Don't be shy about saying it, even if you're embarrassed. This is not going anywhere besides the SSA. They don't shoot it across the internet and give it to your friends. Okay? Page 9 out of 10. We're still on 20, and now it's J. How well do you handle stress? Obviously, for anxiety people, it's usually very, very, very poorly because depression and anxiety often overlap. That could be the same for the depressed person. It could be the depressed person goes and hibernates. They recluse even more when things look stressful out in the living room. So that's something I would explain. When I feel the stress coming on in my house, I just go to my room and I'll come out the next day unless I'm relegated to bed because I'm so depressed. How well do you handle changes in routine? Again, that seems implicated in both depression and anxiety because severe depression, the motivation to even get up is gone. It is sometimes very implicated when we're supposed to get up and do something different because we can't even do it rote. We have to actually focus more. And we lack that as well as the motivation. With anxiety, changes in routine, and everybody's different, but I have seen that it is definitely causes more anxiety in a person with anxiety than maybe before they ever had the anxiety where they could jump to it with a change in routine and it wasn't a big deal. Have you noticed, this is L, have you noticed any unusual behaviors or fears? I think anxiety and severe depression that puts you in bed and anxiety that makes you constantly think. I think they're both unusual behaviors or fears. So you would want to kind of expound on that a little bit. So you're probably going to be saying yes to that. Then 21 is about assistive devices for physical nature. If you do have physical things, obviously you'd fill it out. That's the thing about crutches and walkers and wheelchairs and canes and braces and splints and artificial limbs, hearing aids, glasses, contact lenses, and artificial voice boxes, and other for anything unmentioned. So that, again, is not implicated with strictly mental health claims. But as I say, most people have more than just mental health, particularly if they're over 50. 22 is really, really important. Do you currently take any medicines for your illness, injuries, or conditions? Yes or no? And if yes, do they cause side effects? I think as a matter of course, all mental health medications cause side effects. They might be ones you like, but there's usually ones also like we want to relax if we're anxious, but do we want to be drowsy? Put it down. I always suggest going to drugs.com or rx.com or whatever the websites are that have all the pharmaceutical medications by brand name and generic, and you can scroll in there, go to common side effects. I wouldn't go to uncommon ones because usually those are death defying and you should be in the ER if you have them. Go to the common side effects And don't just look to see, do you have that condition that they're describing, that symptom? Don't pretend to be the doctor and know whether for sure it's coming from the medication or from that medication or this one or anything else. Some of the medications all have the same side effects. It could also be drowsiness because you don't sleep for squat the night before. Not your concern. They asked if you have that effect. I would always put it down. It's not your job to figure out, is that really coming from the 10 milligrams of that, or is it coming from the 15 milligrams of that? How are you going to know that? You're not. So just describe all the medicines and then that have any side effects listed under the common side effects that you also have. So you could have drowsiness under 3 medications if it happens to be a common side effect of all 3. That's what I do. And, SSA is familiar with medications and how severely they are known, some, to interfere with somebody's, lifestyle, say. And there's some medications that de facto they're going to be like ding, ding, ding. And then, but the majority of them people take and they could still work. So you need to emphasize this very strongly. Think about the effect you have depression, anxiety. That is so limiting as it is. If it's severe and like you said, bedridden certain days as a regular course, imagine the impact on top of that of the sedating effects of medication or the ones that make people paranoid, right? Or, yeah, sedating, drowsy. Some might have implicate balance, requires a nap, daytime napping. So don't want to forget any of that. They do give you a remarks section that you can add things to. By and large, I think there doesn't need to be a lot of additional statements in remarks. Some people try to write a book and attach like 5 pages of single space typing. I think that is a mistake. If you are honing in on the important things and don't write in full complete sentences, this is not an essay. It is getting the substance down. That would be abbreviations, short phrases. I don't want to see my people. I'm like, I don't even want to see full sentences. So anywho, I hope that helped, guys, for the mental health crowd. And I hope I did at least some kind of job that gives you some information better than what you had before you watched this. It was kind of a daunting thing when I first thought about it, when the person brought it up in one of the comments on the YouTube channel. And today I was thinking, let me try to do that because it's so important. And our mental health peers, the ones that are suffering from things, it's hard enough as it is to try to figure out how to do these things because of the mental health struggles, and then to not have any kind of explanation further. And if you're not one of my clients, obviously you're not getting it one-on-one from me. So I hope this helps a little bit. And still don't hesitate, though, to go look at the function report sections in the function report playlist where you can go number by number, because most of you are going to have physical limitations. They're just not necessarily going to be the ones that will have a great effect on your case, particularly if you're under 50. But you still want to put them down. Hey, stop that. You're going to break that. Sorry, the bird is poking at a sentimental picture I have on the wall that my daughter did for me years ago. All right, that's enough, guys. I will see you later. Again, don't forget the playlist for the general, SS population, where each number, if you're concerned about number 5, just pick up the number 5s. Number 6, you don't have to, it's not one big long thing like this is. Although, like I said, I think this is going to be, it's been kind of a while now. I think it's going to have to be broken up into multiple segments. I like to keep them short. All right, I will talk to you guys later. Have a great one. Bye-bye.